All right. Look, I want to start off by taking this opportunity to express my deepest gratitude to the graduating class for nominating me to deliver a last lecture. I want to thank everybody for being here as well, but I want to give a special shout out to the School of Business, faculty, and students for being here. I appreciate your support. Now I'm going to start off by telling you I was born in Cameroon in Central Africa, and I work on African Standard Time. So my speech or lecture could be 10 minutes or 30 minutes. So get ready for it. So when I received the email from Lucas a few months ago indicating that the senior class had nominated me for this lecture, I was initially inclined to decline. And I was inclined to decline for at least two reasons. Well, the first is that I knew that Professors Ettinger and Taylor, two colleagues whom I respect and hold in such high regard, we're going to be giving last lectures today as well. So I was a little intimidated. And I almost said no, but, well, I'm here. So I guess I did. But I think the second reason is, for a guy whose entire life can be summarized in 3 words, economics, soccer, and beer. I had no idea what I'd be talking about today. And until a few days ago, I really didn't know what I'd be talking about. And on Monday, I was flying from Kansas to Potsdam, and I had a to Ogdensburg, and I had a layover in Boston. And while I was sitting waiting for the plane to board, I noticed that there were all these seats available right next to me, and a bunch of people would come, and instead of sitting next to me, they just stand. And for a second, I thought there was something wrong with me, so I'd smell myself, and well, I wasn't stinking, so that wasn't the problem. And at some point, this lady walks by, and I look up to her, and she's standing, and I look up and I say, hey, no one's sitting here, so you can sit. And she looks at me and she smiles and says, well, thanks so much, but I'm okay standing. And I thought to myself, I'm not even hitting on her yet. And she's already not sitting next to me. Well, the flight gets delayed and delayed, and it's evident that she'd rather sit than stand. So I'm trying to thaw the ice, in this very weird Bebonchu-esque way. And so I look up to her and I say, do you watch politics? That's a bad way to start. And she's like, no, not really, I'm not into politics. Why? What's up with that? I said, well, a couple of years ago, there's all this talk about Russia and everything that's been going on. And a few years ago, Russia invaded Crimea, a small part of Ukraine. And, the United States and Europe imposed sanctions on Russia. And in November of 2015, in Germany, the president of Russia met with the German chancellor, and he was trying to convince them to cooperate with him on Syria and other global challenges. But the United States and Russia took a tough stance the United States and Europe took a tough stance on Russia. And at some point, the Russian president got a little frustrated, and he turned to the German chancellor and said, and I quote, look, no matter how things go between the bride and the groom on the first night of marriage, the final result will remain the same. And so I turned to this lady and I go, do you understand that? And she goes, no, and I have no idea why you just told me that. And I said, okay, well, think about this. we're going to Ogdensburg. It's a small plane, capacity of 10 people. And there are 3 elderly couples going with us. So chances are they're going to be sitting together. That's already 6. And then there is me and you. That makes it 8. The pilot makes it 9. I'm pretty sure you're not going to be the co-pilot. So whether you sit with me now or on the plane, the final result is you're going to sit with me. And she laughed and said, okay, well, she sat next to me, and eventually we got on the plane. But even before that, she said, are you really sure about this? I said, yeah, well, I'll bet you $1 that you're going to sit next to me. And well, we got on the plane, and she sat next to me. And while we're sitting next to each other, we were talking, and I told her a little bit about myself. She told me a little bit about herself. And the topic of the last lecture came up. And I said, I have no idea what I'm going to be talking about. And she said, well, the story you've told me is really compelling and really powerful and really inspiring. Why don't you talk about that? And I thought to myself, well, why didn't I think about that? And so, well, when we got to Ogdensburg, she said, hey, Bebonchu, it was a pleasure to meet you. And I said, well, it'll be a pleasure to meet you after I get my $1. So I got a pretty good idea for my last lecture, and I got $1 as well. So it turned out pretty well. So I'm going to take her advice and follow the tradition of previous last lectures by telling you a little bit about my story and hoping that perhaps we could take a thing or two about my story and learn from it. It's a story that was made of 2 continents. It's a story about struggle, but as far as my life goes so far, it's also a story about success. And I stress on as far as my life goes so far because I have a way of screwing things up. So who knows where it might go from here. But so I was born in a small country called Cameroon in Central Africa. That picture is actually a picture of the city, of the town I was born in. And my family wasn't very wealthy. I'm actually going to show you a picture of me. So that's me at 1 year old on the left and 3 years old on the right in the middle. That's how we rocked it in 1989. And those are my siblings next to me. And my family wasn't very wealthy. No, they're far from it. But my parents, worked as hard as they could to provide us with what we needed. And like most kids growing up in Cameroon at that time, I grew up with one dream, well, for a while. And my dream was to play professional soccer. Right? And so I'd go around playing soccer, most of the time without shoes, but I would just play with the hope that someday I'm going to go pro. And my dad, the biggest realist I've ever met, would say, look, it's really cool to have big dreams, but what's even better is to have multiple smaller dreams. And that stuck with me forever. And so by the time I was 10 or 11, I'm at that age where I start noticing differences between myself and others, between my family and other families, things my family could afford that other families couldn't afford, or things they could afford that we couldn't afford. And so at this tender age, I started formulating my own ideas about issues related to income inequality. And so for people who know anything about my research, they'll know I do a lot of work on income inequality, and now you know why I do all of that. Look, my family and I often watched a bunch of American movies, and as a kid, I was often so mesmerized by how different life was on different sides of an ocean. I'd watch these movies, and I was so mesmerized by how tall buildings in the United States were. It's fascinating, you know. And I mean, I'd get goosebumps sometimes just by looking at skyscrapers, you know. And I would often ask my dad, because at that age, every boy believes that their dad is the smartest person in the world. You know, so I'd go to my dad, who wasn't an economist, and I'd go to him and say, "Hey, Dad, how is it possible that they can afford all these tall buildings and skyscrapers, and all we have is a bunch of tin roof shacks?" You know, my dad would say, you know, they're a great country, you know, and he'll try the best he could to explain why these differences existed. Now, as not an economist, for every response he gave me, I have 10 or 20 more questions. Yeah. And so, by the time I was 13, maybe 14, I was in probably the equivalent of middle school or high school here. And I took my first economics class. And I realized that economics provided answers to all these questions I had had since I was 9 or 10, you know, with good models and theories and axioms that I really liked. You know, and so I knew that if my dream of becoming a soccer player didn't happen, well, my backup plan would be to be an economist. Well, you know that place that's got all those tall buildings? That's where I want to go. That's what's next for me. You know, ignorant of what it takes to come to the United States, but even more ignorant of how expensive college in the United States is. But my family, my parents would make the ultimate sacrifice. They'd sacrifice everything, and I mean everything they had, for me to come to the United States and go to college. And as soon as I got here, I started understanding the enormity of what they had done. And I immediately decided to go to a 2-year college, a community college, instead of the more expensive 4-year college. But even that was too expensive for my family. And even without telling them, I decided my first semester of college that I was going to drop out. This really wasn't for me. I wasn't going to make my family do all of that. You know, but as fate would have it, all those days of playing barefoot soccer wouldn't go in vain. You know, so before I had the chance to quit college, I got a scholarship to play soccer. And you know, while the scholarship covered much of my tuition and fees, it still didn't cover other expenses. And without having family here in the United States, I had to work to cover those expenses, and work I did. Very often against collegiate athletic regulations, but at that point I really didn't care. You know, so I would get a job as a security officer. You can see there on the screen. I was 18 years old, security officer. My coworkers called me toy cop because I was 18, but I looked like I was 11. And this picture doesn't do justice because I was 109 pounds, so I really didn't look like I could secure anything. But I took the job, and when I wasn't playing soccer over the weekends, I would go to KFC and put in probably 10 hours. So as an undergraduate student, I worked at least 40, very often 50 hours a week. And so I did work full-time. I played soccer full-time, and I was a full-time student. And that was a little challenging for me. I would later transfer to the University of Maryland, where I'd eventually get a bachelor's degree in economics. But my dream of being an economist didn't stop with a bachelor's degree. So I would immediately do graduate work at Kansas State University, where 4 years later I got my PhD in economics. But those years were, I describe those years as the darkest years of my life, and here's why. So I faced a bunch of emotional challenges, as well as a crisis. I don't know if I call it a crisis of confidence, but I was trying to find out who I was. Look, as an undergrad student, I was busy. I played full-time soccer, full-time classes, and all of that. But as a graduate student, yes, I still played soccer, but I played soccer leisurely. My funding as a graduate student didn't depend on soccer anymore. I worked, but I didn't work 50 hours a week anymore. I taught a principles of macro course, and prepping for that course it didn't take me 50 hours, I'll tell you that. So I had all this time in my hands, and I was about to turn 21, so I had access to alcohol, legally. And at that time as well, my first and only girlfriend had dumped me because she couldn't do a long-distance relationship. And my mom, whom I hadn't seen in 3 years, had come to visit me for my graduation, and she was getting ready to leave to go back to Cameroon. And I had no idea when I was going to see her again, or if I was going to see her again. So these clearly were challenging times for me. But through the love and support of family and friends and some really, really good professors at Kansas State, I bounced back, and I still managed to complete my PhD in record time. So I hope my story, I hope you can take a couple of things from my story. For me, here are a few things I take from my story. Number one is that no one's self-made. We often act as if we were born in a log cabin that we built by ourselves. But it's really not true. No one really is self-made. And sometimes our pride can stand in our way of seeking help. And very often, when my pride stands in the way of seeking help, I'm reminded by that song that's always withstood the test of times. And I really wish everyone knew this song. I'd sing it with you. I'm an economist. I sing terribly, but I don't mind anyway. Lean on me. Right? Sometimes in our lives, well, someone's got it. We all have pain. We all have sorrow. But if we're wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. I'm getting carried away. I can keep going forever. But I wouldn't. Thanks. So lean on family and friends and anyone who's willing to support you because it matters. But the second thing I learned throughout my experience so far, and some of these might sound a little cliche, but they've worked for me, is that you shouldn't underestimate the power of simple dreams. I'm talking about the dream of a kid born and raised in the heart of a small country in Africa, who believed too that someday he could get a PhD and somehow contribute to the dialogue on income inequality and poverty and things related to development. All too often we emphasize on people dreaming big, and we almost deride people who've got small, simple dreams. But how easy is it is for us to forget that we as a people have always made the greatest strides, not by accomplishing big dreams, but accomplishing small, simple dreams. And so I want to emphasize and insist on the importance of having small, simple dreams. And the final thing I want to say is, and I think any students who've taken econometrics with me here, anybody? Oh, there we go. Yes, I think you're going to love this. But if you remember anything from But I think hard work and success are very highly correlated. I'm not sure if the relationship is causal, but I know for sure there's a very direct correlation there. Now, I'm not saying that if you work hard, success is guaranteed. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you don't work hard, you're guaranteed to fail. So I want to emphasize on the importance of hard work. Achieving your goals will never come easy. Very often you will make mistakes. I did. There will be setbacks. But what I know for sure is you can't back down. You shouldn't back down. You can't give up. And a couple of reasons why you can't do that is because you've got people who've sacrificed so much for you to be here. That's certainly the case for me. But equally important is that you've got people who are looking up to you. I've got students, I've got younger siblings and cousins who look up to me. You can't afford to give up, because if you do, what happens to them? Those who look up to you. And so as we leave this forum today, one thing I want to emphasize is that you must remember that when tough times stand between you and your dreams, you must stand up. And when you can stand up, well, just do like one of my sheroes, Rosa Parks, just sit. And as you sit, you must always respond with courage, with strength, with clear purpose, with the power of the ideals of Clarkson and the values of Clarkson, and with that time-honored tradition that summarizes who we are and what we do. We fight for what we believe in, because in the end, we are Golden Knights, and that's what we do. That's who we are. Thank you so much.